I would now like to welcome representatives from the Australian Jewish Association via video conference. Now, I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and evidence has been provided to you, as it is to all witnesses. And I will note that the committee takes the protection of witnesses extremely seriously, and an issue has come to light that we will be pursuing through our processes here, and we'll deal with and discuss with you separately. But we do take it very seriously. For the Hansard record, I would ask that you both state your full name and the capacity in which you're appearing with us today.
So, Robert Gregory, Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Jewish Association.
And Dr. David Adler, and I'm President of the Australian Jewish Association. Thank
you very much. Now, you have provided us with an opening statement. All the opening statements have been tabled and will be published. We will, because we are pretty tight on time, we have a lot of senators with us today. We'll go directly to questions if that's all right with you. And we'll start with Senator Sharma.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I've got your opening statement, I believe, or your submission rather. You mentioned in there that there's strong community opposition to these proposed changes, and you've been inundated with messages of concern. Would you mind just elaborating on, I guess, the level of community concern you've detected amongst your membership?
Well, Senator, the AJA is guided by genuine Jewish values, by Torah values, and our tradition going back thousands of years for Jewish academic development is built on free speech. It's built on a contest of ideas, even back to biblical times when emerged two major Jewish learning institutes called Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. They were known for having contrary views on the interpretation of Judaism and Jewish practice. If you like, they had their different views of what the truth is. And we've had a number of messages from rabbis, from people in the Orthodox community, that the whole basis upon which Jewish academia stands is that a person should be free to express their views, express their assessments on various issues, not so much obviously as to advocate violence, but the contest of ideas is a major part of our tradition. Jewish practice involves learning. It's a major part. It's why Jews are sometimes referred to as the people of the book, and that should be conducted in Australia. And in some ways, what is being proposed now before the Parliament is a less mature approach to the contest of ideas than has existed in Jewish tradition even a couple of thousand years ago. So that's sort of the basis of the concern. It's come mainly from the rabbis, mainly from those in the Orthodox community, but also those that are centre-right conservative politically and see it as an important foundation of Western democracy broadly.
And I'll just add to that, many members of the Jewish community, they come from places like the former Soviet Union, like apartheid South Africa, so they do understand the implications of the government policing whether certain speech is acceptable or not. And going into specific examples, I know we dealt with earlier today the religious teachings, things around gender and marriage. There's concern in the community that Jewish practices, which are thousands of years old, could come under in breach of the law. But the bigger issue is, even if individuals aren't going to be prosecuted, if it's going to be the social media companies that are, it has a chilling effect on free speech. And that's something That's a concern we're hearing from the Jewish community, that people are going to self-censor. AJA has been ourselves targeted by various online campaigns. We've had strikes against our accounts. We've even had a social media account taken down. And we always manage to overcome these obstacles because they're unfounded. But the average person is not going to fight against the big social media companies, and they may just give in, they may self-censor, and this is going to create a really chilling impact on political speech and all speech in this country.
Just one final question then, Chair, thank you. There is an exemption in the legislation, the draft legislation, for reasonable dissemination of content for any academic, artistic, scientific or religious purpose. Would you be comfortable with the tech platforms or behind them, ACMA, making a determination about what's reasonable dissemination for a religious purpose for Judaism? Do they have the expertise to be able to make that assessment?
Clearly not, Senator. And we note also that there are exemptions for government. There's exemptions for mainstream media, for main media, but there's no exemption for a community organisation that represents a religious community, such as the Australian Jewish Association. So we, for example, every Friday afternoon publish a message on religious teaching in the lead up to Shabbat. Anyone that's interested can go onto our Facebook page and scroll any Friday afternoon and you'll see examples of that. Now, often we try to make the message related to current events, and it is eminently possible, in fact likely, that there could be people who take exception to our Shabbat message, for example, and that they make complaints. So we do not think it's the role of social media companies to assess whether the AJA Shabbat message is reasonable or not. We believe that it always is, and if someone disagrees, they're free to say so. But so it affects us very directly.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Adler. Thanks, Mr. Gregory. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. On that point that you've just raised there, Dr. Adler, do you feel that the exemption in the bill, and I'll just quote it to you, that reasonable dissemination of content for any academic, artistic, scientific or religious purpose, do you think that covers what you've... Because to my interpretation, it would cover what you've just said as a concern that you wouldn't be able to put out your Shabbat message.
No, what I said is that it would be open to challenge, and even if we were able to deal with the challenge, it opens a complaint mechanism. I'll give you a related example. Before you introduced us, you mentioned that there had been an issue. I'll perhaps have an opportunity to raise a concern later, but we are under extraordinary attack every day. I maintain my medical registration, and therefore it is possible to make complaints against me using the healthcare complaints mechanisms. I believe there was a period late last year and early this year when I was the most complained about doctor in the country. Not for any clinical reasons, just because people picked up my public comments and complained about it. We use Jewish values not just for the Shabbat message. We also use Jewish values for our Israel advocacy. So there is a Torah view on what the land of Israel is, and certain political issues, obviously, and contested political issues flow from that. So we do have concerns, not just for the Shabbat message, but I could give a whole range of examples where we base our commentary on Jewish values as it applies to all sorts of political issues. And of course, Israel advocacy is a major part of that.
Okay, but do you feel the exemption gives some latitude there in terms of enabling, because I think one of the things we are concerned about is the attacks on religious perspectives, the rise of anti-Semitism, etc. And do you see that exemption would cover some of your concerns?
It would cover it if it was purely religious, and occasionally that would be the case. But we work at the interface between Judaism and politics, and in combating anti-Semitism, in commenting on a range of issues, be they gender-related, marriage-related, be they related to Israel and conflicts and other Middle East matters. So, if it was purely religious, I understand the point you're making, but our role is that would be a small proportion.
And everything's obviously open to challenge. So, it's a Jewish religious teaching that the land of Israel is a Jewish homeland, but people would consider that a political statement and would challenge it on that. And because Judaism has a unique position where it's also part ethnicity, race, it's a bit of a mix between things. So it's not just going to be clergy that are speaking out. It may be, layman people, it may be even secular people speaking on the religious issues. So I don't think it's that clear that these type of things are covered with that exemption.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Senator Roberts?
You're muted, Senator
Roberts.
Robert.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for being here. First of all, Dr. Adler, I want to thank you for your work for all Australians. All Australians. You've been a proud supporter of freedom. The government says that we can't trust the platforms, the social media platforms. The platforms are the problem. And then they get them to do the censoring. Is that a fair assessment of this bill?
That would probably be the default position at the end of the day. Of course, the bill also talks about codes of conduct and other, intermediary mechanisms. But at the end of the day, and look, we've seen it played out in practice, and perhaps the most spectacular example is Twitter becoming X, and the difference before and after the change of ownership in what sort of content it would carry. So, it does potentially give enormous power to the social media platforms, and for many, many people, including much of our base, and it's probably worth mentioning for the benefit of the committee that AJA is by far the largest Jewish organisation as measured by social media following in this country. In fact, we've built the largest Jewish community platform Australia has ever seen across the various components of social media. A couple of months ago, we announced that our reach on X annually had exceeded 40 million, which is really a big deal in the Jewish world. So we would be concerned about them being the arbiters of what is acceptable conduct, acceptable information. Yeah.
We've had experience with the social media companies. We often had, when we started up, we had things taken down just by AI and then, by junior people in these organizations. And it was very time consuming to challenge it, particularly on Facebook and Instagram. Now we have senior contacts in the social media company, so we don't have any issues. But the ordinary Australian doesn't have those contacts, and they should not trust the social media companies who, by default, will just remove anything they think is controversial.
Thank you. And my second question goes to the fact that there is no arbiter of truth in this bill. Is that correct? And is that a problem for you?
That's a central issue. It's massive. And if I might draw to the committee's attention a health example that I gave, because I know a couple of people have been talking about the COVID pandemic. I used to be 2IC of the Australian Medical Association, and I've also had state and Commonwealth government appointments in a health advisory capacity. Some of you will remember in early 2020, near the beginning of the pandemic, Australia introduced something called the COVID Safe app. The Prime Minister at the time, Scott Morrison, even said that it was like sunscreen going out in terms of its protection. And I had a look at the way that the COVID Safe app worked. And even though the government and the health authorities said it was a really important tool that would deliver benefits, I was critical. I said there is no way that it will deliver the benefits that the government is claiming and that the health bureaucracy is claiming. Now, that is an example which falls squarely within a provision of the legislation about potential serious harm. Here I was in early 2020 criticising an initiative of the government to deal with the pandemic. It was about 2.5 years later that the COVID Safe app was abandoned because its performance was even worse than my assessment. I published my thoughts, collated them and published my thoughts in an article in the Spectator magazine, April 2020, which is still available online. So the arbiter of truth would not take into account examples like that, where what was put forward as truth early 2020 was demonstrated to be a falsehood 2022, 2023. And I was personally involved in that one, and I have other examples.
Thank you. Your statement states, quote, "The Australian Jewish Association shares the concern of some members there is a strong risk the bill will stifle religious expression. Following rejection of the voice referendum, it has been suggested the government is trying to prevent scrutiny of other unpopular government policies." End of quote. Can I confirm you believe that is an accurate reflection of this bill, that it's stifling proper scrutiny of other unpopular government policies?
Robert, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a concern we've been hearing from our members. This issue, every so often an issue comes around where we just get an avalanche of communication. The Voice actually was another one. We often deal with foreign issues, but in terms of domestic issues, this has been, there's been a huge outcry from the community, from our members, and we have heard that concern raised many times, that the timing is suspicious. Why has this been rushed before an election? Why did this come in after the Voice? I can't, speak to the motivations behind it, but that's certainly a concern we are hearing from many members of our community.
Thank you. For clarity, the Australian Jewish Association opposes this bill proceeding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Correct.
Thank you. Your submission uses the example of the
Senator
video.
Senator Roberts, we're going to have to rotate. Can you make it your last question?
Thank you, Chair. Your submission uses the example of the video of Bishop Mari Emanuel. Is it your position that the E-Safety Commissioner's actions in trying to remove that video served to defend one religion from scrutiny and elevated one religion's rights above another's?
Senator Roberts, I can't speak for the Commissioner. What we can say is that we thought that the video was important because it accurately portrayed a significant event. And we were one of the early people who put the video on our social media. On AJA's social media, it was seen over 700,000 times. And we got an approach from Elon Musk's legal team saying that they had received a takedown order, we thought the principle sufficiently important that we participated in supporting the legal case against the e-Safety Commissioner. And the reason we thought it important is because it rapidly became clear the perpetrator was a radicalised young Islamist. And although the target was a Christian cleric, the issue is of major concern to the Jewish community, and we learned subsequently that the group that he was in were also discussing attacks against the Jewish community. And sometimes the only way to pressure action from our governments and from law enforcement authorities is through public pressure. And that's one of the reasons why we thought the video was important and why we supported the case of X in its federal court proceedings.
Thank you both. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Senator Canavan.
Matt?
Gentlemen, just want to pick up on where Malcolm was earlier around believing or trusting the social media companies. As we've discussed, this bill sets those up as needing to establish a code of their own to regulate misinformation and disinformation. I particularly want to ask you about TikTok, which I don't think seems to have gotten enough attention. The focus has been on American social media companies, but there's a very large one called TikTok, which has an interesting, at least, relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. I just want to ask you whether you have any concerns about the Australian government effectively sanctioning a social media company that at the very least has a tight relationship with a foreign government who may have an agenda that is very different from the agenda of Western free and liberal nations.
Well, I mean, we're not experts on TikTok, but we've obviously read the concerns and we share these concerns. AJA is active on Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We purposely don't have a TikTok account because we do share some of those concerns. I'm not sure whether it's for this committee, but I think the government needs to take a very strong look at social media companies connected to hostile governments. What we do know about TikTok is the #1 platform for spreading anti-Semitism, and including in Australia, whether this is being done intentionally, as some have suggested, encouraged by the Chinese government, is a major concern for the Jewish community. So that's...
Thank you, Chair. That's all I had. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Excellent. We'll go to Senator Billick.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I misunderstood what you were saying in regard to the timing of this bill, but I'm just wondering if you're aware that the original recommendation for an enforceable code came from the final report of the ACCC's Digital Platforms Inquiry, which was released in 2019, and that under the Liberal National Coalition government under Scott Morrison in 2022, he promised to introduce laws to combat misinformation and disinformation online by empowering the ACMA. So that was a long time before The Voice. So I just wanted to see if I understood what you were saying correctly.
I mean, we are aware of that timeline. Thank you, Senator. We are aware. And we also understand the coalition has come out against this legislation. So I'm not sure whether it's in the form that it was originally envisaged or whether world events have changed as they rapidly do, particularly in the social media space.
Well, they have certainly changed their mind, that's for sure. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate you spending some time with us this morning and sharing your views. We will release you now, but obviously we'll be in touch over the other issue.
Chair, is it worth me making a comment on the other issue, or you prefer not?
Look, if you'd like to, but I'm not sure of the value. But it's entirely up to you, Mr. Adler.
I'll make it 30 seconds then. I'm not sure how often people who appear before Senate committees are warned not to, and that warning is accompanied by a death threat. But that happened over the weekend. We were sent an illustrated death threat of a hangman's noose, together with the words that if we appeared before the committee, we would die. And I just think it's a reflection of the spike in anti-Semitism that is now at crisis level in Australia. And this committee is not about the Middle East conflicts. And there are now people who think that at threat of death, we should not participate in Australia's democratic processes. And that's really all I want to say.
Dr. Adler, I received your information at about 8:45 this morning. The committee met before the hearing started. We discussed the issue. We have already reported it to the AFP. We are pursuing the Senate pathway that is articulated. We take this kind of action extraordinarily seriously, and no one who appears before a committee should ever have to endure those threats, and we will pursue this. Thank you. Senator Cadell.
The committee was unanimous in taking this action. Thank you for the chair for leading it, and thank you for coming despite those threats and giving your evidence today.
I want to
thank you for the action. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to second
we'll let
that.
you know.
I want to endorse that, Chair.
Great. Certainly.